Okay, so let's imagine the Arctic Circle back in 1990.
Yeah.
Russian scientists are huddled in this lab, and there are these rumors swirling around about UFOs and just like this crazy energy.
Yeah, wild stuff.
And that's exactly what we're diving in today. This is a deep dive into this mind-bending experiment and the science behind it.
What I think is so fascinating about this is that the main source that we have for this deep dive is, we're calling it the pasted text.
Right.
And it's not just about these strange events that were happening at this lab. It also introduces a radical new perspective on something that we all experience every single second of our lives, and that's time.
Time, man.
And so our goal today is not to get too bogged down in the complex scientific jargon, but to really pull out those key claims.
Right.
The strange events, and then the surprising theories behind them.
Yeah, give us the TLDR.
Yeah, exactly. This is your express route to understanding a weird and captivating piece of scientific history.
Yeah, I love it. And at the heart of this story is Nikolai Kazarev. Now, you might not have heard of him, but back in the early 20th century, he was a pretty prominent Russian astrophysicist.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about him is some of his ideas were like totally rejected by the scientific community. But then he was later proven, right?
Right.
So for example, in 1958, he reported seeing volcanic activity on the moon.
Oh, wow.
And everybody was like, nah, that's not possible. And then years later, guess what? The Apollo missions confirmed it.
Wow. So he was ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to keep in mind as we go into some of his more unconventional ideas.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, too. Like, a lot of times when we're dealing with really groundbreaking concepts, they face a lot of pushback initially.
Yeah.
And Kozarev's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
One of the things that he really put forward was this idea of torsion fields.
Okay.
And essentially what torsion fields are is that there's this twisting force in space-time itself. Now, if you want to visualize it, think about like wringing out a wet cloth.
Okay.
The twisting motion.
Right.
That's essentially what torsion is.
Yeah.
So in theoretical physics, this refers to the actual twisting of space-time itself.
Got it.
And we're all pretty familiar with Einstein's theory of relativity,
Yeah.
which describes gravity as the warping of space-time by mass and energy.
Right, like the bowling ball on the rubber sheet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a bowling ball, you put it on a rubber sheet, it's going to create that dip.
Yep.
That's how we usually picture it.
So Einstein gives us the bent space-time, and then Kozyrev comes along and says, hold on.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah, it's not just bending, it's also twisting.
It's twisting. Yeah, so it's like a slinky. If you stretch out a slinky,
Yeah.
it's not just bending, it's also twisting.
Right, exactly.
And that's kind of how Kozyrev saw space-time. He's like, it's not just curving because of mass and energy, it's also fundamentally twisting.
Yeah, and he believed that this torsion
Was a fundamental aspect of how the universe operates.
So then that brings up the question, what's causing this twisting?
Right.
Because with Einstein, it was the spin of subatomic particles.
Exactly.
But Kozyrev had a different idea.
Yeah. His idea was that torsion wasn't a result of particles at all. He believed that it was actually caused by time itself.
Okay, whoa.
And to get to that idea, he first had to kind of revisit this older concept, this concept of the ether.
Right.
Now, mainstream science generally considers space to be empty like a vacuum.
Yeah.
But Kozyrev disagreed. He argued that there has to be some kind of invisible medium filling the universe. And he called that the ether.
Now, the ether was this idea that was popular for a long time.
For centuries.
Yeah, but then they did those experiments in like the 1800s.
Yeah, the Michelson-Morley experiment.
Yeah, and they couldn't detect it, so it kind of fell out of favor.
Yeah, it went out of style.
But Kozyrev was like, no, wait a minute. Like, if you think about it, birds need air to fly. Fish need water to swim.
Yeah.
How does light from a star that's thousands of light years away,
Yeah.
how does it get to us?
Right.
Is it just traveling through nothing?
Yeah, does it just magically teleport?
Exactly. So Kozyrev's argument was that the ether is that medium,
Right.
that it's necessary.
Yeah.
But he didn't see it as just like a static background. He thought it was active and constantly interacting with everything.
Yeah, it was dynamic.
Dynamic. Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting because he then connects this active ether with his understanding of time.
Okay.
So he theorizes that time isn't just a passive dimension, the way
Yeah.
that we usually think about it.
Like on a clock, just ticking away.
Yeah, just ticking away in the background.
Yeah.
He said, no time actually has physical energy and structure to it.
Whoa.
And this time energy, as he called it, flows through and interacts with the ether,
Okay.
creating these ripples or waves of torsion.
So it's like throwing a rock in a pond.
Yeah, exactly. So if you imagine like a school of fish swimming through water, their movement creates these waves.
Right.
Kazarev saw time creating those same kind of waves, but in the ether.
So if time has energy and structure, that kind of opens up a whole bunch of possibilities, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And Kazarev certainly thought, so he believed that because of its physical nature, time could have different densities, it could speed up, it could slow down, and even potentially move backwards.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing.
I know, right? And now, of course, in our everyday lives, we experience time as this linear flow.
Right, always moving forward.
Always going forward, from past to present to future.
But Kazarev suggests that that linear view is only part of the picture.
Okay.
He's saying that while we perceive time as flowing in one direction, like we're on a boat, being carried by a river's current, he believed that the entire river, the past, present, and future, all exist simultaneously all at once.
Okay, so then what about these torsion waves that time is generating?
What are they doing?
Well, he proposed that they could act as a way for information to be transmitted instantaneously.
Across all of time. So the past, present, and future.
So now we're getting into some seriously mind-bending stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And to try and prove this, Kazarev actually did some pretty wild experiments. He used telescopes.
Oh, wow.
But not in the usual way, like to observe light from stars.
Right.
He was trying to detect these torsion fields coming from a distant star, and he picked a star that was 10,000 light years away.
Wow.
So think about that. The light that we see from that star is from 10,000 years ago.
From its past.
Yeah, exactly. It took 10,000 years for that light to reach us.
Right.
But Kazarev claims that he was able to detect torsion not just from the past, but also through calculations from where that star was in its present, and even where it would be in its future.
Whoa, hold on. So he's detecting the past, present, and future of the star all at once.
All at the same time.
That's implying instantaneous information transfer.
Exactly.
So it means that information is not bound by the speed of light.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more wild, because Kazarev also believed that there was a really strong connection between this time energy and the human brain.
Yeah.
So he theorized that things like intuition and foresight are actually our consciousness tapping into this flow of time energy.
Oh, wow.
And he even went as far as to say that our thoughts and our emotions can actually influence the physical world through this interaction with time.
So our consciousness is directly interacting with this time energy and potentially shaping reality.
Yeah. And this leads to his idea that mirrors can bend absolutely anything, including time.
Yep.
So we all know that mirrors can redirect electromagnetic energy like light.
Right. That's basic optics.
Right.
That's how they work.
Exactly. But Kazarev takes it a step further, and he's like, well, if mirrors can do that with light, why not time energy?
Right. Why not?
So he specifically focused on concave mirrors.
Okay.
And if we look back through history, concave mirrors have been used to concentrate light for a long time, like ancient burning mirrors.
Yeah. The Greeks and the Romans would use them to set ships on fire.
Right, exactly. And then in the Renaissance, they were using them for scientific experiments.
Yeah, and today we use them in telescopes and satellite dishes.
Right, so they have this long history.
Yeah.
But Kazarev's idea was to use them to focus time energy. He even patented a special spiral-shaped metal device that was based on Fibonacci numbers.
Wow.
And he believed that aluminum was like the most responsive metal for this.
So he's got this spiral made of aluminum.
Yes.
Designed using these mathematical patterns that we see throughout nature.
Yeah.
And he's claiming that he can bend time with it.
And he claimed that with an early version of this device, he could see 10 seconds into the future.
Wow.
So at this point, the Soviet government's like, okay, we need to classify this research.
Yeah, that's a little too far out there.
It's a little too much. So this leads to his next prototype, which was a much larger capsule. And the idea with this one was to have the interior walls completely covered in this special time-bending mirror material. Okay.
And the theory was that time inside this capsule would flow at a different rate.
So potentially someone inside could experience the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about this because there have been other historical figures who have had similar ideas, like Nostradamus.
Yeah.
He had his metal egg, and then he had this magic mirror.
A bowl of water acting as a reflective surface.
And Leonardo da Vinci, he sketched something called a mirror chamber.
It's like these brilliant minds were all tapping into something.
Yeah, they were sensing something.
Some kind of hidden possibility.
And Kazarev was actually building it and experimenting with it.
Right.
So it's understandable that this kind of research would attract attention.
Absolutely.
Not just from the Soviets, but also from the CIA.
Right.
And then in a really mysterious turn of events, as he was preparing to test his new machine in 1983, Kazarev passed away suddenly.
Oh, wow.
Officially, it was kidney failure.
But there are always those questions.
Oh, yeah, always those questions.
Yeah. So this brings us to the next phase of our deep dive, which is the Soviet program in the 1990s.
Okay.
So even after Kazarev died, research into these concepts continued at the Institute of Experimental Medicine in Dixon, which is this really remote settlement in the Arctic Circle.
Right above the Arctic Circle.
And they were using devices that were directly based on Kazarev's work.
These spiral-shaped metal structures.
Yeah, they called them Kazarev Mirrors.
Kazarev Mirrors, yeah.
And all of these events are actually documented in this book called Cosmic Consciousness of Humanity by Drs. Kaznechev and Travimov.
And it's a fascinating read.
So as soon as they activated these Kazarev mirrors in Dixon, things started to get really strange.
Yeah.
The researchers reported this intense field of fear.
Like a waves of fear.
Yeah, emanating from the device. And it wasn't just like a feeling. They described it as this almost physical presence.
It's like a deep primal terror.
Yeah, and they couldn't explain it.
Yeah. And in the pasted text, they talk about how people felt cold, their hands were trembling, their heads felt heavy.
Wow.
And they described the fear as so potent that it felt like a tangible substance in the room.
Oh my gosh.
And then there were these energy discharges.
What?
They called them plasmoids.
Okay.
And they were like ball lightning appearing and disappearing above the mirrors.
No way.
Yeah. It was wild stuff. And what's even stranger is that the strangeness wasn't just limited to the laboratory.
Okay.
There were people in the town who started seeing all sorts of unusual aerial phenomena.
What, like UFOs?
Yeah, like disc-shaped lights hovering near the facility.
Wow.
UFOs described as ellipses emitting light.
And were these like just quick glimpses, or were they seeing them for a while?
No, some of these sightings lasted for several minutes.
Oh, wow.
And they were reported by multiple witnesses, including the lab personnel and the local residents.
So it's like they opened up this portal or something.
It's like they activated this mirror.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all this weird stuff starts happening.
So then they start doing experiments where they have people actually enter the Kazarev mirrors.
Yeah.
And the first experiment, they had operators in mirrors that were located in Dixon and Novosibirsk, which are about 1,400 miles apart.
Pretty good distance.
Yeah, so the task was pretty simple. One person would focus on a symbol and try to mentally send it to the receiver at the other location. And the results were pretty surprising.
What happened?
Well, it seemed like the success rate was directly tied to the activity of the Earth's magnetosphere. So on calm days, when the magnetosphere was stable, they had almost zero success transmitting these symbols. But then when the magnetosphere was active, like during a solar storm, the success rate jumped to between 30 and 45%.
So it's like human consciousness was somehow interacting with these geomagnetic fluctuations.
Yeah, which really supports Kazarev's idea that solar activity can generate these torsion waves. And that those torsion waves can influence all sorts of things like weather patterns and human consciousness.
And potentially even more.
Yeah.
So this led to a second experiment, which was even more ambitious.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
This time they had 2 operators in different cities, and they were focusing on sending images, not just to each other, but projecting them into the Earth's magnetosphere itself.
Okay, so they're sending it out into the world.
Yeah, out into the ether.
Into the ether.
And they had 5,000 participants in 12 countries around the world, all trying to tune in and receive these images.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it was a massive experiment. And when the magnetosphere was active, the success rate was 95%.
95%? That's incredible.
I know, it's amazing. And what was even more remarkable is that they found that children, particularly young girls from families with spiritual or shamanic backgrounds, seemed to have this amazing ability to receive these transmissions.
Really?
Yeah, so in one test, instead of sending an image, they had the sender just think of a number. And the kids were able to receive that number, identify the corresponding symbol from a list.
And draw it.
And the accuracy was just uncanny.
That's wild. So as the volunteers were spending more time inside these Kazarev mirrors, they started calling it Kazarev space.
Right.
They started reporting these shared experiences. So at first, a lot of them felt physical sensations, like their bodies shaking pressure in their heads.
Right.
But then that would be followed by this feeling of lightness, almost like an out-of-body experience.
And the visual and sensory experiences were just as powerful.
Yeah.
And they were often shared between participants.
Even when they were in different locations.
Even when they were miles apart.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, people reported seeing faces flickering in their vision, these dark clouds appearing, a sensation of weightlessness, like they were flying waves passing over their heads. And a lot of them also had this feeling of another presence being in the room with them.
Oh, gosh, that's a little creepy. And if you look at the pasted text, they actually have like a chart of these common experiences.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Almost 90% of the participants reported the sensation of flying.
Wow.
And the vast majority also saw things like outer space, celestial bodies, even UFOs.
But one of the weirdest things that they reported was this phenomenon they called common visualization, where glowing, swirling symbols would appear in the room.
And this wasn't just in their minds. They were actually seeing these symbols.
In the physical space.
In the physical space, yeah.
And they weren't all seeing the same symbols, were they?
Well, that's the crazy part. They documented like 2,000 distinct symbols.
That's a lot of symbols.
And the linguist actually analyzed these symbols and found that 80% of them originated from ancient cultures.
Wow.
With the most frequent symbols coming from ancient Sumerian.
So it's like this mirror was unlocking some kind of shared level of human consciousness.
Or tapping into some universal symbolic language.
Yeah, like a deeper connection to the past.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does. And the effects weren't just limited to the time they spent inside the mirrors.
Right.
Participants reported these lasting benefits even after they left Kazarev space.
Yeah, they claimed that they were thinking more quickly, that their scores on IQ tests were higher, that their memory was better, their creativity was enhanced, and in some cases, they even had some of their health issues resolved.
So these are some pretty profound effects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as scientists involved, they really believe that this technology could lead to this significant advancement in human consciousness.
Yeah.
Provided it was used ethically.
Right, responsibly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth noting that the CIA was also very interested in this research.
Of course they were.
Yeah, and they also expressed concerns about the potential for misuse.
So this is where things take another strange turn with this phenomenon that they called the observers.
The observers, okay.
So a large percentage of the participants, around 75%,
wow,
reported seeing UFOs while they were in Kazarev space. And even more, 70% saw what they described as extraterrestrial structures.
Wow.
And 68% felt the presence of intelligent entities.
And they started calling these entities the observers.
And what were these experiences like? What were people describing?
Well, the sensations range from just this feeling of being watched to actual physical sensations like cold touches.
Really?
Some people describe seeing these bright humanoid, but clearly non-human figures.
And were there any instances of communication with these observers?
Yeah, in some really unsettling cases, there were even reports of communication happening between different mirrors.
Between the mirrors?
Yeah, so one participant described a voice asking about the individual with them.
Wow.
And when they asked who was speaking, they received these cryptic and disturbing answers.
Like what?
Like, league. Hey. I have no face. I am nothing and everything.
And unkind eyes.
Yeah, unkind eyes.
That's really creepy.
It is. It's really unsettling.
And then one of these observers actually gave this pretty disturbing prediction. One participant described seeing a figure who warned that Earth was in danger, that it was experiencing suffering and facing a potential disaster.
So it's not clear if this was like a vision of a specific future event.
Right.
Or more of a general warning about where we're headed.
Either way, it's not good.
No. It's not very reassuring.
So then there's also the reports of time travel.
Yeah.
Over 40% of the participants reported experiencing some form of time travel.
Wow.
And these weren't just like vague feelings. Some people described viewing their own lives like they were watching a movie.
And others actually interacted with their past selves or observed or even participated in historical events.
No way. Give me an example.
Yeah, so the pasted text talks about this one woman who recalled being an advisor to Genghis Khan.
Wow.
And another person felt their consciousness transfer to someone in the Middle Ages.
Or even the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Mind-blowing stuff.
And this all ties back to Kazarev's idea that time energy carries information. And he believed that this was especially true during phase transitions.
Yeah, like when water freezes or melts or vaporizes.
So the Dixon site, with all of its permafrost, was chosen partly because they thought that information from the time the water froze was trapped within the ice. And then when it melted, that information was released.
And potentially accessed by the participants.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And it's important to note that all of this research is documented.
Yeah, it's not just like hearsay.
Yeah, there are resources out there where you can learn more, including a Russian documentary.
And despite years of research with government support in Russia, mainstream science in the West largely ignored it.
Except for one organization, the CIA.
Of course, the CIA was all over it.
And declassified documents show that they were really interested in this.
And there are even claims that they conducted their own independent research.
And one classified CIA document specifically mentions Kazarev Mirrors and their potential for unlocking human psychic abilities.
Yeah, they saw the potential.
So how do we assess the validity of all of these claims?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, because mainstream science is still pretty skeptical.
Yeah, they're not buying it.
But then you have major intelligence agencies that were clearly invested in this.
Right, they were pouring resources into it.
And the scientists involved published detailed findings. They gave interviews.
Why would they risk deceiving the Soviet government on such a large scale?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But then if this technology is so powerful, why isn't it more widely adopted?
Right. That's a good question.
Apparently, you can even purchase blueprints in the mirrors themselves.
Really?
Yeah, so it's definitely still in the realm of fringe science.
So I guess accepting the potential of Kazarev Mirrors is kind of tied to accepting his whole theory about time energy and the ether.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
It makes you wonder if they had used different terminology like dark matter or quantum foam.
Or emergent space.
Yeah. Would it have been more accepted by the scientific community?
It's possible. I mean, look at Kazarev's track record.
Yeah.
He had ideas that were initially rejected and later proven correct.
It's true. He was ahead of his time.
Yeah, he was a visionary.
It does sound like science fiction, though, like reflecting time with a mirror.
Yeah, it sounds pretty out there.
But there was a recent development that kind of echoes some of Kazarev's ideas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just last month, as of our recording in April 2025, scientists at the Advanced Science Research Center at CUNY, they achieved what they call time reflection.
Time reflection, wow.
They sent an electromagnetic wave through this metamaterial, and it emerged moving backward in time.
So they actually demonstrated time moving backwards.
Yeah, which really challenges our linear perception of time.
And according to Dr. Travamoff, the potential applications of this are pretty remarkable.
Yeah, like what?
Well, he's been using Kazarev's theories and mirrors for earthquake prediction.
Oh, wow.
And he's having significantly higher accuracy compared to traditional methods.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and they also suggested it could be used for predicting weather patterns, volcanic eruptions, solar storms.
Even studying the depths of space.
Yeah, and searching for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right. Yeah.
And they even talk about potentially impacting aging and disease.
So this is some pretty world-changing stuff.
Absolutely.
But despite all of this potential and the recent experimental validation of some of Kazarev's ideas, mainstream science is still largely ignoring it.
Yeah, they're not really paying attention.
And Dr. Kazarev actually expressed concerns about the potential for government or corporate control of this technology.
Right.
And the scientists involved, they really wanted this technology to be available to everyone.
They wanted to democratize it.
Exactly. So I think Kazarev's work, whether it's fully accepted or not, really presents this interesting perspective on human potential, our interconnectedness, and our ability to influence reality.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, consider this in light of everything that we've explored today, from the historical accounts of those Arctic experiments to the recent scientific demonstration of time reflection. What if Kazarev's theories are true?
Yeah. What are the implications?
What would it mean for our understanding of reality consciousness and our place in the universe?
This deep dive into the pasted text really gives us a glimpse into a universe where time and perception might be a lot more fluid than we think.
And we encourage you to think about the potential benefits and the potential risks of these radical ideas and technologies.
Yeah, because this is powerful stuff.
It is.
And I think the most thought-provoking question that comes out of all of this is, will this knowledge be democratized and made available to everyone, or will it be controlled by a select few?
That's the big question.
Yeah, which path is better?
And what personal discovery might await you if you were to explore this further?
It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot to ponder.
So until our next deep dive, keep questioning and keep exploring.
Absolutely. Stay curious.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.